We all rely on farmers and ranchers, but farming is riskier than other businesses out there. Crop insurance helps farmers manage their risk. With crop insurance, farmers put skin in the game by paying premiums and shouldering deductibles. That keeps taxpayers from having to pick up the whole bill every time disaster strikes. Today, about 90% of U.S. farmland is insured, providing $100 billion in protection to more than 130 different kinds of crops. It's a testament to the program's success.
Thank you for joining us for our Agri-Pulse Washington Week in Review. I'm Spencer Chase, joined this week by Phil Brasher, as well as Kansas Senator Jerry Moran, joining us to discuss kind of the week that was, agriculturally speaking, in foreign policy. And obviously one of the highlights of the week that we just saw, the week that we're bringing to an end here today, is that on Tuesday, we saw the House of Representatives drop a bill that would sort of a CARES 2.0, the HEROES Act, as they call it, a $3 trillion bill to kind of another step in the congressional response to the market reaction to the coronavirus. And Senator, I'd like to get your opinion on some of the things that are in this bill, because it was almost immediately decried by some of your Republican colleagues as a non-starter that would not pass in the Senate. But this is sort of the starting point for negotiations between the House and Senate on another potential piece of legislation. So what is it that we see in this bill, a $3 trillion bill, including $16.5 billion to the Commodity Credit Corporation? What is it that we see in this bill that you think might have some staying power and might be a good starting point for negotiations on ag policy issues?
Well, Spencer, I would say that I think there will be a phase 4. What I describe, we've been through really 4 pieces of legislation, but I describe that as 3.5 phases, because the fourth one was mostly restocking money to programs we'd already committed to. And so I think there will be a phase 4. While we've been through the first 3 phases in a pretty nonpartisan, bipartisan way, I would guess and estimate, in my view, that it becomes more difficult to keep that bipartisanship going. And I don't know that the speaker was of any help in that regard in introducing a bill that didn't have Republican involvement in the House. And you started the conversation by emphasizing $3 billion. And while we've spent billions, about that much already, I think there's a real angst about continued trillions of dollars in spending. So you're right. It's a starting place, but I wish it was unveiled in a more cooperative, let's get along, Republican Democrat kind of fashion. Having said that, I think the agriculture provisions that are included in that bill, the concepts that are there are ones that I think many in agriculture would like to see us address. And so I think that it appeared to me that the Colin Petersons of the House prevailed in a way in agriculture that was a good place for us to start, and includes many of the things that agriculture producers across the country are looking for. I would say that all of us I can't speak for everyone in the Senate, but my colleagues that I know well, those that are involved in agriculture and rural issues, I think we all recognize that the $9 million that we put into the CARES Act Phase 3 is insufficient to meet the significant challenges that agriculture faces. I'm seeing, hearing, and listening to agriculture commodity reports certainly on a daily basis, and the challenges that our producers face is tremendous, and there's a lot of work to be done.
Senator, to get drilled down a little bit into the specifics, but not too far, there's a lot of money authorized in this bill. There's $16.5 billion to do an additional round of these coronavirus direct payments to farmers to compensate them for the impact of the crisis. But there's a number of other forms of assistance authorized, to dairy, to ethanol, indemnification of pork producers who've had to euthanize hogs and so forth. Can you realistically do more than this in the Senate?
I don't know. The negotiating tactics would suggest that we can find a common ground in regard to agriculture. I think if you put the Aggies in the House and the Aggies in the Senate together, we could find something that would be comfortable for us to support. It's like all things in legislation, is that many bills include things that are something that you, as a senator who represents a state like Kansas, we want to see, and a whole bunch of other stuff that is less important to us in our circumstances. It's been one of the things. I mean, I have voted for the 3.5 phases. Those bills include things that I don't like. They are of a magnitude that is contrary to my view about the size and scope and the spending by the federal government. The point is that none of us got exactly what we wanted, and so there has to be give and take. This is a very diverse country, and of course, agriculture, and therefore the number of members of Congress who represent agriculture, we're a minority. For as long as I've known the two of you, that has only become a greater challenge. Fewer and fewer people, even in the ag committees, are actually involved in agriculture or come from states that agriculture is at the forefront. I remember counting the number of, for example, Midwest members of the Ag Committee a long time ago, and we in the middle of the country are even a minority in that regard. So there has to be give and take. I would guess that the House numbers are probably the high end, and the Senate will be on the side of greater restraint and more fiscal conservatism.
Mm-hmm. Let me ask you specifically about, a number of the farm groups, Farm Bureaus in particular, have been supporting a proposal to more than double USDA's spending authority through the CCC, Commodity Credit Corporation. Limit has been $30 billion a year going back to 1980s. The proposal is to increase it to $68 billion, which is what it would be if it was indexed. $30 billion was been indexed for inflation. This House bill doesn't do that, and as you know, there's a lot of opposition in the House to giving Sonny Perdue that kind of authority. Where's the Senate going to come down on that?
Well, I share some of the concerns. I mean, I certainly want the Commodity Credit Corporation to have sufficient tools. The Secretary Perdue, and secretaries in the future need the ability to be flexible and to respond quickly. But we have seen circumstances in the past that cause us to be cautious. I'm always of the view that, particularly as an appropriator, that I want something to say about how money is spent. And so I want some level of flexibility for the Secretary to respond quickly, but I don't want that to be carte blanche. I don't want that to be total. And so I think there's something in the middle. The House did not go as far as the Farm Bureau proposal. That caught my attention. And I would guess that there is, this will be compromised in which, yes, give the Secretary more ability, more authority, and more resources, but not to the extent of where it becomes, in a sense, a blank check. So I think there'll be some restraint. Congress, just as an institution, but based upon past experiences in which there were those who saw some what was seen as political spending to help candidates and across the country by an administration, that really created a circumstance in which there's skepticism in giving any cabinet secretary total authority and with a checkbook that's got a pretty big balance.
So, Senator, as we look forward, obviously, kind of a big question is, what the schedule might look like, sort of from here to the next couple of months. And so, with that in mind, we've seen the House proposal, and we've seen, some discussion from the administration and from the Senate. When do you think we should anticipate some kind of bill coming from you and your Senate colleagues?
Well, in part, I think the schedule is dependent. I mean, there is a question about what is the administration's position toward what was announced this week by the House of Representatives. And the administration has had a habit of negotiating with House Democrats. And is there anything here that suggests that that's going to happen, and we'll see something that becomes a House and a Trump administration plan? I don't think that's the case in this circumstance, but I wouldn't be surprised but what there are components of what the House has done that the Trump administration will find a desire to be supportive of. We'll have to see what comes from the White House in this regard. And I think, again, Senator McConnell, the majority leader of the United States Senate, has expressed his view that we are in a waiting moment in which we determine whether what we have done is working, how well it's working. I certainly agree with the idea that we've put a lot of money into trying to deal both with people's health care, their health well-being, as well as the economic well-being. And it would be nice to know whether our programs are successful and what gaps we have left to fill. But again, when it comes to agriculture, I think, it was I don't say a last minute effort, but it was toward the end of the debate of the CARES Act in which the Aggies were insistent in the Senate of getting the $9 billion into that bill. Again, knowing that was, I think most of us knowing that's insufficient to solve the problems. I think where we are now in the Senate is to see what is occurring in the economy and what is occurring with the virus. The two things in regard to the virus are the stay-at-home orders and the social isolation. How well are they working? And as many states now are opening up their society, their economy, people are going back to work and out and about more. Are they abiding by social distancing? Are they being responsible? And the reason that's important, certainly for their health and the people who they come in contact with, but the issue is, what does the virus do in this environment? And so the response by Congress, in my view, needs to, in part, be determined by what is happening to the spread of the virus and what we see happening economically. While we talk about, I'm very interested in really all of the commodities that are struggling today. We're paying particular attention to livestock, and it was an effort on a serious and conscious effort on behalf of senators in the House. I'm sorry, in the Senate, senators in the Senate, to include livestock specifically in our directions to USDA for assistance. And I'm very interested in seeing how successful we are in the efforts to control COVID-19 in our meat processing plants. If you want to do something beneficial to livestock producers, the best thing we can do at this point in time is to make certain that meat is still being processed, that cattle are still being slaughtered, and that is a challenge that has to be met. And it in part determines how much more assistance livestock producers, beef and pork, others as well, would need or would receive from Congress. So I think there's some facts yet to be determined. The other one is, does summer, the warmer weather, slow the spread of the virus? Do things get better? We need a few more facts. But I think the political demands will be, the economic demands will be for greater assistance. And we have, some of the nation's experts at the Federal Reserve and current and past who are talking about the need for additional economic stimulus.
So realistically, we're looking at June, maybe July before.
It is. The House introduced a bill at a time in which not that many members of the House of Representatives were present. It seems to me that was a negotiating tactic, a press conference, an announcement that this is all the things we want. And I would criticize the House bill. If it's going to be something, whatever the future proposal is that comes to me as a United States Senator, it needs to deal with COVID-19 and the health and economic consequences of the virus, and not be a Democrat wish list of all the things that they want to do in their caucus, particularly in the House, that they can't get done in the absence of a crisis. We have been reasonably successful in limiting phases 1, 2, 3, and 3.5 to things that are specifically related to consequences of COVID-19, and not a Republican or Democrat wish list for things they want to accomplish just generally. And if you want to have a bipartisan agreement and get something accomplished, administration, House, Senate, it can't be the long list of things that are included in the House bill today that many of us find objectionable, many of us find philosophically a terrible direction for the country to go. And it has to be things that we can agree on that are specifically related to the virus, either economically or healthcare, although in most instances, those two things really mesh well together. Taking care of people's health takes care of the economy. So where the House has started, you described it as a starting point, a negotiating position. Maybe so. I see it in large part as a political document trying to appeal to their voters, the Democrat majority in the House's voters, what I would say is that's not the needs of the moment. The need at the moment is for us to find things that Republicans and Democrats can support on behalf of the American people.
Mm-hmm. You mentioned something earlier that we want to just chat about quickly here before we let you go, and that is kind of the state of play in the American meat sector right now. Obviously, in the last month, we've seen a number of facilities shut down, slow down, what have you. I know livestock and livestock processing is a big deal in the state of Kansas, the beef industry in particular. And there's been sort of this train of thought that we've kind of turned the corner, and that the worst of it in terms of the meat processing side is behind us. Does that mesh with what you're hearing from your constituents in this industry in particular? Do you think the worst of that is behind us?
Well, I think that, I mean, first of all, let me confirm what you said. We are an ag state. We are in particular a livestock state. And that's true for what we grow on the crop side of agriculture, grain, sorghum, and corn. And the meat processing plants in our state, I mean, we slaughter about 30% of the beef slaughtered in the country in Kansas. It's a $10 billion industry, the processing industry in Kansas. It employs 18,000 people. We have a wide variety from large to small meat processors in our state, but certainly the largest are here with Cargill, with National, and with Tyson. And I actually, this is important enough to me that whatever it is now, 3 weeks ago, I called the White House and said, I need to talk to the president. And that day, President Trump called me back, and largely for the purpose of explaining to the White House how serious this meat processing issue is, because the consequence is bad enough for those who are in that business, in the meat processing business, in the slaughter business, the people who work there, but it has a huge consequence on the livestock producer. I think of it in the way that I didn't understand. We're also an oil and gas producing state. The price of oil dropped dramatically, and it was predicted it will have a negative value. I couldn't understand in my own mind what that meant until I discovered that if you were an oil producer in Kansas, the pipelines were full. You had no place to send your oil, and you were being asked to pay somebody to take it off your hands. And then a few weeks later, as the meatpacking plants either closed or slowed down across the country, we've been pretty successful in keeping most plants open, though they process meat more slowly in Kansas than they used to. That is the same circumstance. There was no place for beef to go. And I've had livestock producers call me and say, Jerry, I delivered my cattle to the processor, but they've now called me and asked me to come pick it up. They have no place to take it, nobody to process it. So it is a real problem. And then you add to Mr. President, you add to that the consumer going to the grocery store or now the restaurant, and you can't get your the product that you're looking for. This has huge consequences, Mr. President. And of course, executive order came about, which is a good thing, liability issues. But the fact of the matter is that you have to have people who can and want to work at a meat processing plant. And that's not by order, that's by they are safe and they know they're safe. So we have a lot of work to do. Your question is it getting better? I think that the PPE, the ability to test, we've had CDC into Kansas, and they have the Center for Disease Control has examined, reviewed the plant floor. They've made suggestions. My understanding is they generally were complimentary of what the meat processing plants in our state had done to provide better health security for their employees. And they are processing meat here today. But just in the last couple of days, we've heard of a couple of small plants that are closing, or another circumstance of somebody who's working at a plant having COVID-19 symptoms and testing positive. So it's still a mixed bag, but it is, what I would say is better is we now have attention on those processing plants. They now are more likely to have the right layout in their plant to protect their employees, and they are more likely to have a mask, face mask, and gloves and other PPE to protect themselves. And so I think things are getting better because the attention that's been paid to this industry.
So obviously a lot of things to discuss here as we kind of look at the week that was and all of the weeks that will be to come here. A lot of things going on in politics and in farm policy in particular. And Senator Moran, we appreciate you taking a little bit of time to join us here today.
Spencer, thanks. I'm in the process today of getting ready for introduction next week a bill to pay for more for overtime for our small meat processing plants, to get USDA inspectors to the places that they could increase production. There's a lot of, I think there's 7,000 plants across the country that are federally inspected. They're not all the largest plants. Lots of those plants have 10 to 50 employees or even a few hundred. And we need to increase the opportunity for the other packing plants to be able to help process and consume beef and pork across the country. One of the ways we can do that is by the federal taxpayer, in this case, USDA, picking up the tab for overtime so those plants can work longer and get some of this meat moving again. So that's my look forward to next week.
Very good. Well, we'll keep an eye out for that, as well as the other various twists and turns that farm policy is taking these days. But I think that's going to do it for this week. So for Phil Brasher and Senator Jerry Moran, I'm Spencer Chase. Have a good one.